classroom analyzing a very interesting political cartoon here.
Yes.
I like this one for a variety of reasons. There's a lot of great images and documents that come out of this incident, but we'll get to that momentarily. So probably just start off with some observations, really start to break it down then.
Yeah, getting into, to try to figure out the historical context of what's going on here, because there's not a lot of obvious images
I don't have any dates for historical context.
giving us what's going on.
No,
So starting on the left, we've got skeleton.
Yep.
Symbol of death.
Yep.
So there is death going on here. Then we have laying down on the ground here, appears to be a woman, clothed in a dress. There's some sort of steam, vapor, smoke.
She's in a triangle.
Coming off of her. She's in a triangle. We see that her right hand is skeleton.
Yep.
So she's obviously dead. And then we've got Mr. Monopoly dressed kind of man over here. He's big. He's fat.
In terms of the historical context, I mean, it doesn't jump off the page. It doesn't scream at you.
Right.
However, what helps me think of historical context is this guy.
Yeah.
I mean, because when did we see the top hats and the girth exaggerated in political
Gilded
cartoons?
Age.
Gilded Age, Industrial Revolution, where profits were more important than people.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I'm thinking of as well in terms of trying to get the historical context would be, rent, profit, interest, all of that, I guess, really attached to this gentleman right here in greed.
Yes. Always when it comes to political cartoon, size can represent many things. Power, strength, wealth, but particularly like when they're obese,
Yes.
greed.
Yeah.
That there's greed involved. And you did point out the triangle before. They use the triangle, yes, because they have 3 words, but the triangle with dead women, this is a clear reference to the tragedy that takes place at the Triangle Shirtwaist factory.
In March 1911. Yep.
Fire kills
somewhere around 146.
130, yeah, I was going to say
somewhere
136.
around that.
Mostly immigrant women to this nation. So when you get into the context, there's a lot. It's industrialization, it's immigration, it's Gilded Age, and the greed of these robber barons, captains of industry, whatever you want to call them.
Another thing as well, when you're looking into the whole greed thing and the exploitation of immigrants.
Yeah.
Of course we know here, and one of the things that really comes out of this is that you had a lot of people that were working there. They were not paid well, and then when it came down to it, especially when you got to that fire, there were a lot of building codes, fire codes, building regulations that were not followed.
Right.
Which led to that high death toll.
If we're doing a hippo here and you think about the intended audience,
Exactly.
this appeared in a socialist newspaper.
Absolutely.
And socialism in the early 1900s on the rise in this country. We're really fighting for workers' rights.
Yep.
Socialism and the labor movement were closely linked together. Today, socialism is a taboo word.
Yep.
But in the early 1900s, it was still viewed as a negative, but they were fighting for workers' rights.
So there's certainly a slant here where he's being portrayed as the bad guy.
He's the bad guy.
Without
The workers, you want to get into the purpose.
Right.
This is a bias against the factory owners. It is a bias in favor of labor unions and workers' rights.
Right. And I mean, when you're talking about that purpose, again, showing here what's happening to a worker, labor unions are going to come together.
All because of unsafe working conditions, unsafe building codes. The owners actually lock them in.
Yes.
And I'm sure your students think they locked them in to keep them in.
And
it was actually to keep labor organizers out.
Right.
They didn't want the shirtwaist factory girls to form a labor union.
And one of the things that caught our eye before we even started this is this right here when you're looking at the courts. And this is also indicating, you see this courts, there's a lot you could spin off with here. We already addressed the fact that weren't a lot of building codes, not a lot of regulation. Government did have a very laissez-faire approach to business at this particular time. But even when it came to this all of a sudden becoming a court case, this winds up being settled out of court. You had a lot of participants that were involved, and when it is settled out of court, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was settled out of court, each family was given somewhere in the neighborhood of $150. And I think I'm even being generous with that amount. It was very, very low.
And you see here it says employer's liability bill,
Yep.
which makes me believe that at some point there was a bill introduced to hold your employer, the owners, accountable for deaths of workers on the job, and it looks like the courts have stabbed that bill.
Absolutely.
That because they settled out of court, it was basically a slap on the wrist for these 2 factory owners in the death of all
Never saw a jail cell.
Yeah, so the death of all these women. There were men involved. Basically just a slap on the wrist.
They never really saw a jail cell, these particular 2 guys, and it was settled out of court. And again, we talked about how that that dollar amount that went along with each family with what they received for their loved one. A lot of them, Jewish immigrant women, anywhere between mid-teens to 20s. A lot of them wind up dying as a result of that. When you're talking about putting a dollar amount on a particular person, really unfair.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that when it gets into the courts today in 2022, and you're looking at trying to put a dollar amount on a particular person, it's very, very difficult because everybody is worth millions and billions and trillions of dollars.
Yeah.
Ask your parents how much you're worth. But in terms of, you're looking at here in terms of a dollar amount, right around, I think it was the $112, $150 mark that's really ringing in my head.
Yeah.
That's even unfair for that particular time period. So we got everything. We got the H, they got the historical context, intended purposes.
Point of view, it is
Point of
from
view.
the point of view of the workers.
Incorporated a lot of outside information
Yeah,
in this.
getting into urbanization, industrialization, labor movement, the fight for equal pay or better pay, less working hours, weekends.
And even in terms of the outside information that it gets incorporated into this, the interesting thing with this particular instance is there are a lot of documents to go along with it. Photographs of women that were out on the curbs.
The eyewitness account
The eyewitness
describing the women
accounts.
hitting the pavement.
Yes, a lot of that as well. All right, we did great with this. I love this one.
Good job.
Interesting one. All right, good. Thank you for watching.